Mr. Lomas.
Yeah.
Let's talk about...
This will be very interesting. I'm going to find this very interesting.
Let's talk about the Holocaust. Let's talk about Holocaust denial and see where we're going with it.
All right.
Right, so the conversation that I was having with my friend this morning, and it's one that he and I have been speaking... We've been speaking about this for a number of days now, is the statistics toward the Holocaust essentially not being the way that they seem. So there are Holocaust deniers that believe not that the Holocaust didn't happen, but that the numbers that are posed are false. So the round figure that we have so consistently been shown of 6 million Jews being killed, there are people that deny that that statistic is as authentic as it is, and they will point to things such as the capacity that the gas chambers had, and they said that you couldn't possibly have got 6 million Jews through these gas chambers. Now, I'll add to that in a second as to round that point out, but I want to see first of all what your opinions are on this matter. Where you stand here.
Where I stand is, I can understand why you believe that, why there's 6 million, it's 6 million Jews, and you think that's way too much for how many gas chambers there are, but you got to think there was a lot of different camps. I know 6 million is still a ton.
Yeah.
And then there's other people. It was mostly Jews, but there was other ethnicities of who did Hitler wrong.
Yeah.
And if Hitler was done, if you denied by the Nazi regime, you normally were sent to a camp.
Yeah.
And how it, I'm trying to think here on my head. That's basically how I see it as 6 million Jews. But it's not just the Jews, I don't think, in that number.
Well, no, that number, I believe, the 6 million number quoted, I believe, is specifically the Jewish population.
Okay.
But where the discrepancy here is there was a gentleman that I was listening to on this topic called David Irving, right? And he is essentially like the godfather of Holocaust denial. Now, what his point was, where he was going with this, was as I said there, that the gas chambers would not have had the capacity between actually extermination and getting rid of corpses to go through that many people. Now, what he was doing in this talk, when he was advocating for whatever reason the ethics and rights of Adolf Hitler, he was using the Auschwitz as one particular, as you touched on there, camp, and the whole corpus of deaths interchangeably. Yeah. So he was saying, as and when it suited him, he was saying that these 6 million deaths occurred in Auschwitz. Now, which you know is not the case. This statistic doesn't stand for specifically Auschwitz, and this is where I feel. I mean, immediately, this guy's written multiple books, so I mean that bodes well for my authoring career, because this guy, you could poke holes into this immediately upon looking into it. As I say, he was very interchangeable with the phrases of, "Oh, how could 6 million Jews die at Auschwitz?" They didn't die at Auschwitz. It wasn't Auschwitz. It was the regime itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I fully understand where you're coming from. Like, I know, I can see why he might think that, the 6 million dying in one place, but it makes no sense.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes absolutely no sense.
Exactly.
How can you, like I said, what you're saying, like, there's not enough room to put all the fire through. 6 million in one place that don't add up.
That wasn't happen. That didn't happen. No one has claimed that happened. That isn't how the story goes.
Yeah.
You know, and I was speaking to my friend on the topic, and I said, another thing that is critical here, that there's two key parts of this that seem to be getting lost in translation somehow, is these deaths didn't all occur in one place, and they didn't all occur by one factor. It wasn't all gassing. Yeah. The factor isn't 6 million Jews that died in Auschwitz of gassing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not how history goes. There was a specific sector of, I believe, the SS called the Einsatzgruppen.
Yes, I have heard about this a little bit.
Now, go for it.
It's, I can. No, you go first, because I need to process what you just said.
So the Einsatzgruppen was essentially a death squad who were enlisted with going into ghettos and villages with the Jewish population and rounding them up and exterminating them.
That was it. Yep.
Now, that was their role. Yeah. That was what they were specifically intended to do. That was what they were supposed to do. Now, when I looked into the psychology of genocide and how World War II and the atrocities actually transpired, there are multiple accounts of the Einsatzgruppen and their mental disarray that occurred as a result of the amount of killing that they were doing. That was why the gas chambers came to fruition. It's because it was too laborious in a depraved sense to carry out that much shooting, because it was a waste of resource on that basis, and the people themselves just couldn't put up with it. It was too much load on the individual man. Now, what happened as a result of this was, rather than it being a one or particular people taking the emphasis and the responsibility of the killing, it became a system. It became a routine of, there would be certain people that would they would organise people onto the carts. There'd be certain people that would organise people off the carts. There'd be people that would round them into either lines as to whether... Yeah, it became a system. And within that systemic order was the gassing.
Yeah.
The gassing was put in place as I say, a very awful and twisted way of being efficient.
Yeah, it's basically... Yeah, they'll basically... Yeah, like you said, they were being efficient about it. They were like I said, to get the numbers up to what we've seen and suggested, there was a system where it was like, you do that, you do this, to just load them all in. They were like treating them like puppets, just leading them to their cage where they would be exterminated. And it's hard for me to imagine what that could have been like for them people, those Jewish people, to have to do this, and all because they believe in one's ethnicity. And for me, it's kind of like... you're like, I'm trying to think there.
Where are you trying to go?
I'm trying to go, like, I could see, like, I don't know, my head's gone blank. You've absolutely nailed it on the head, basically, kind of what
I may well have nailed it on the head.
You held it on the head.
I say, I'm not trying to argue a for or against the regime at play. I'm just putting facts into here. But there was I shall take the reins for a moment.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
There was an interesting kind of neighbouring point that I saw on the gassing of people. Said so Zyklon B was the gas that was sort of used across the board through the death camps. It was Zyklon B.
Yeah.
Now, people seem to, and I heard, do you know Jordan Peterson?
No.
Jordan Peterson is a very prevalent academic on YouTube, and he's very well known.
Yeah.
And he essentially said that Hitler had a sort of complex OCD regarding vermin. Now, the story goes that actually this Zyklon B was supposedly used for actual genuine vermin extermination, and that is why there was such a copious amount of gas belonging to the Nazi regime. This is part of the Holocaust denial. Oh, look, here you go. This is the dog whistle. Now, to be honest, I cannot get on board with this thinking at all. I try my best to understand how someone can think this, but it's quite obvious when you actually look into the way that the death camps were set up and the gas chambers in particular. I was looking at it earlier. There was one of the most prevalent of points on this was, how could the gas, given the fact it took 5 to 10 minutes to work its charm, and about 24 hours for it actually to be extinguished from the room that it was in. People argue, how could you have been as efficient as you say you were if you couldn't keep getting into the room? Because if it took 24 hours for the room to actually be free of gas, how could you start funneling people in there? You wouldn't be able to. It would still be full of there or it would still be enough full of gas to be an issue. You wouldn't be able to clear the bodies. Exactly that. And there have been these sort of pillars located in the gas chambers that were initially thought to actually extinguish the gas, push the gas out.
Get the breathe. Yeah.
Whereas they actually bring the gas in. That was their intended purpose. They brought the gas out. So to round this point out here with the gassing, there seems to be on the side of Holocaust deniers this sort of explanation, this twisted explanation as to how Hitler had so much gas was not for depraved and twisted genocide, but rather for the extermination of vermin, some say.
You're good at this.
I'll try.
Just to add on to your point with like verming and trying the gas and how you can't get the bodies out, it's you've hit the nail on the head.
Just to bring back to a point that you said not so long ago about how could you put yourself, how could you imagine what it was like to be one of the Jewish people in this position. There was a sketch that I saw earlier that really painted this picture for me, ironically, of just how awful that must have been. Yeah. There was 15 ovens in Auschwitz-Birkenau, which of course we know what they were used for. Yeah. Interestingly, there was another sect of this Holocaust denialism is that these were used for ridding people of illnesses. Well, maybe they were, but not in the way that you thought.
No, not in the way you'd think. No.
But this sketch had the Jewish themselves putting these corpses into the ovens. Now, it hadn't occurred to me actually when I first came across this and actually really went into the atrocities of the genocide, who it would have been that would have got rid of these bodies. It never occurred to me that it would have been the Jewish people that were doing it, but of course it was.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, that is true. They would. Some Jewish people would basically be the Nazis' puppets and like basically be in charge of some to stop themselves being punished. Basically, they were some of them were commanding them to the chambers. Some people they were doing the fire stuff. They're basically being their puppets to stop punishment from themselves. And it's so sad to think that some people would kind of go against their own people because they didn't feel safe. To keep themselves alive at this point. This is about 3 or 4 years down from how long it's been going on for. I think they started rounding up in the early 40s. 1941, thank you. And think about it. It was only I think 1943 is when they started killing. It wasn't straight from 1940. Right. It wasn't straight from 1941. So when going back to what you said with the 6 million, that means they would have had to kill 6 million Jews in over 2 years, which is quite a lot in just over a 2 years time span.
It is a lot, but that speaks for what it speaks for. It is a lot. Hence why it is such an atrocity. And it bemuses me as to why I love conspiracy theories. I'm absolutely infatuated with exploring things that might not be the way that they'll be, and I'm sure we'll go there soon.
Yeah.
But I can't understand why, of all the things to conspire and explore, that the one that actually excuses Hitler of some blame is the one that you would choose. Of all the things that you can look into, you could look into things that that actually have some credible ground to them, like one of the litany of coups that the American government have been involved in, or there are atrocities where people should be brought to account for what it is that they've done. Should we really be talking about whether Hitler was as bad as we think he was? I think we've kind of distinguished that. I think we know that.
We know Hitler was a bad person.
Yeah, but this is what I mean, is why these people like David Irving, where I think, why is this what you've dedicated your life to? Why have you dedicated... when you bring it down to brass tacks, what you have dedicated your career to is making Hitler look like a better person.
He's not. He's far from that.
Exactly.
He's far from that. He's one of the worst people ever to exist in human nature.
Yeah, I have to say, he's not particularly popular.
No, he's not particularly popular, but he was popular with the Germans, and that was the thing at the time. Because they were in the dumps. World War One caused what would lead to Hitler into what.
Well, that's it.
He came up with a plan. He said to the German people, "I can fix it." And when they're in poverty and they can't get any money because their dollar has gone down, or what, I can't remember what it was at the time. It was German Deutschmark.
Their currency.
Their currency. They they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So when any man comes up and says to you in the policy, I can fix it,
Yeah,
they just followed it, and he got elected into it.
They were thrust into abject poverty
Exactly.
at our hands.
At our hands, because we blamed the Germans in the first place, and that's the mistake we made.
Well, I was thinking about this. I think there's some murky waters here, because Germany were responsible for the First World War.
Yeah,
it was them. I know
Serbia.
Yeah, I was going to say, in actual fact, it was the assassination of
Art Ferdinand or something.
And
I can't remember.
Ferdinand is certainly right. His assassination was the catalyst for war occurring, but Germany were actually the sort of propagators of the war. They were the ones who were bringing war.
Yeah, they were the ones that wanted basically more land, basically, and basically how it all kind of been was it was just allies of allies.
Yeah.
So when Austria and Hungary invaded Serbia, Serbia had an ally in Russia, Austria and Hungary had an ally with Germany, and then Russia had an ally with France. So they all came in. We didn't come in until a bit late because we were a bit like, oh, do we really want to get involved in this? But when Germany invaded Belgium, we got involved because they were invading neutral countries, which was the first act of war crime, invading neutral countries. Of when Belgium tried to, because France had a barrier between I can't remember what they called the barrier. Germany wanted to just not fight that, so they went through Belgium to try and go around the outside, something that Hitler would do later on, but do it at a much better pace than Germany. Germany basically in World War One, because we got into the trench warfare, but it was so slow for them. Oh, I'm trying to make sense of my sentences now.
Just keep going with that.
So Germany went tried to go around Belgium, and that's when England got involved. United Kingdom got involved, and so that's when the first clash was. And Germany tried to get through, and they got into France, and then the whole trench warfare from the seafront all the way down to the bottom, and that's when trench warfare began.
Why was World War One fought in the trenches?
Because it was basically because it was you had no man's land, and they basically dug for the winter, basically. So when it got to winter time, to keep themselves warm, they all dug for the winter and to outflank each other. So basically, they were all for the first 2 years of the war, they were all trying to flank each other to the point where trench warfare basically covered that entire western coast. And every time a battle happened, you would only gain like a little smidgen. You were stuck in a stalemate for 4 years, basically. And that's basically what it was like until America got involved, and that's when the final push started coming through, and we beat Germany in 1918, because Germany was going to see if they could get Mexico, because Mexico were going to get involved in it. So Germany sent like a little telegram to Mexico saying, "Wouldn't it be funny if you invaded America?" Yeah. America saw this, and then when America saw that, that's it, off they go, because they didn't want to do war and stuff. And there was a German minority in America who was supporting Germany in the war, but when they saw they were committing atrocities in war, they were a bit against it. So America tried to stay out of it, but then when Germany tried to say to Mexico, get involved, America came in with the extra troops, and then Germany tried to do one final big push, and when the American soldiers arrived, we pushed them, squeezed them in, because Russia on the other side squeezed them in, and we won that war. And then when we got into later years, when the Treaty of Versailles happened, like I said, we blamed Germany. We basically said they couldn't have this, they couldn't have that. We basically just destroyed their country.
No military presence, a hell of a lot of repairment.
Exactly, a hell of a lot of repairment. And that went on until one man came around and said he can fix things.
Early 1930s.
Early 1930s, and when he got into power, he started adding soldier power, and it kept getting a bit of a presence, and he started invading little countries around him. We didn't do anything.
So who did he invade for?
I think it was Czechoslovakia. I think.
Right.
No, it was Austria, because his home was Austria.
Right.
So he united Germany and Austria. We didn't do anything because we didn't want another war. So we were like, Hitler was going like, oh, I'm going to see if I can do this. And we allowed him. So he kept going, and so he kept expanding. So he started with Austria. They all just let him in because he was a native of their country. He was born there. Yeah. So they just let him in and welcomed him in. We didn't do anything about it. And then Czechoslovakia, he basically just went, I want that thing. And we're like, no, you can't have that thing. And then he started invading. I was like, oh, no, you can have that thing now. And Czechoslovakia was like, what are you doing? And then when he was looking at his eyes at Poland, a lot of people thinking you do invade Poland, we're going to have problems, and then I think it's like a month or 4 weeks before, Germany make an alliance with Russia, because at this point Russia is now Soviet Union, is now communism, and that's shocked everyone. So when on the 1st of September, Germany soldiers walked into Poland, Russia, Soviet Union soldiers walked in and basically squeezed Poland out, which was the first big decisive thing of the war. And I think it was over 2 months, he took over Poland. And that is where most of, the Jewish camps would be set up. Yeah. And all of that would happen. So what would be your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, I immediately had an interesting question to put forth to you there. Do you know about Operation Barbarossa?
Oh yes, the invasion of Russia when Germany invaded Russia.
Yeah.
I always find this in great generals like Hitler, you had Napoleon. What I always
would you call Hitler a great general?
No, I won't. That is a lie. All right.
I was going to say, I mean, because in actual facts of terms of war, I'd say he was a fantastic orator.
But it was his idea to invade. I wouldn't say he was like a general, but it was his idea to invade Russia because he wasn't getting anything on the west side, and his relationships with Stalin was going down. And I always find in history, all these big countries that wanted to take over the world and stuff always fail to the point when they invade Russia. The minute they invade Russia, it all goes down. Like Napoleon, he invaded Russia, and that's when his massive... He basically had everything. Around France and all that, coalition, the Napoleonic Wars, he had everything. And then when he invaded Russia, that's when it all started going wrong, because he lost the battle in Russia, because he sent the biggest army all the way into Russia. And when he sent that biggest army, and what they did was, they just ran away. And that just tied his resources. And then when they got to Moscow, they were so knackered, Russia won battle and pushed them back. And then coming back to World War II when Operation Barbarossa, when he sent all of those troops in, Russia did the same thing. They held back a little bit and see what happened. So they started, Germans started saying all stuff. But when he got to Stalingrad, which at the time, I think it's called Volograd now. Volograd.
I don't actually know.
Yeah, I think it's called Volograd now. It was called Stalingrad at that point. That was one of the most bloodiest battles of the whole war. Mm-hmm. Where the Russian soldiers basically put down their lives for it, and it was one of the big battles that they won. And at that point, Germany were more knackered, and basically, I still think this is a mistake on Germany's behalf. They now wants to get in a war on two sides, where before, because they had the Soviet Union on their side, it was only one side. They only had to focus on the West. Now they had to put some of their troops all the way from the West to all the way from the West to the East, because they have got to now defend the two borders again. And then Japan, I think it's the Axis powers. So Japan, Germany, and Italy. Japan go and do something silly, and because Hitler wanted to keep America out of the war. He knew that was the big mistake of that First World War. Keep America out of the war. Yeah. And then Japan did something silly and went to Pearl Harbor and bombed their ship and dockyards, which was even though they attacked
the sleeping giant.
Yes, the sleeping giant. Even though they basically didn't attack any of their big ships, they just had little ships. So technically, America weren't really that damaged. You just aggravated them, and they got involved.
It was principle though.
Yeah, it's principle.
You attacked
America, and then America got involved, and then at this point, Hitler was like World War I. Basically, he's got to finish Britain quickly. Otherwise, the same issue is going to happen, and then once again they were all just closing in on them, and the Battle of Britain was another failure. And I still 100% believe we wouldn't be British or anything out there if we didn't live on an island. We would have.
Do you feel?
I do believe if we never lived on an island, we definitely would have been taken over by a different foreign power by now.
So you feel that our secularism,
yes, is a very powerful benefit. Why we're not speaking German or French.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, as you say, by landmass, we're a tiny country.
Yes.
And on that basis, as you say, to have a whole body of water circulating.
We're one of the most powerful navies in the world.
Encircling. Yeah, exactly.
So we've literally got an incredible border and one of the best.
Yeah, and in itself, we've got an innately strong border.
Yeah.
We've got a whole body of water in the way, which is certainly at least somewhat useful.
Like I said, and it's something. Yeah, they are. Yeah, like our greatest ally is our border.
Yeah, makes sense.
It does make And so when Hitler went for the final battle to try and with the Battle of Britain, where we beat one of the most powerful I can't remember what the air division was called on the top of my head now. I can't remember what it's called on the top of my head.
Don't worry, carry on.
Yeah, so for us to beat, because it was that his air division was one of the most powerful air divisions in all of history,
right.
And for us to beat that division was one of the great turning points of the war, because after that he never would have had Britain again. That was his big effort to finally get Britain out of the war, and we didn't. We survived. We won the battle, and that's when because he was, and that comes back to the Russia thing. That loss there kind of was Hitler needed a victory. He needed a major victory in this war, so he invaded Russia, and then when Russia started going wrong, he kind of knew he didn't have much time left, which is why he started the exterminations of the Jews, so he can imprint his point on people.
Fast tracking that process.
Yeah, he's fast tracking it.
There's actually something, in fact, that I made a point toward on the basis of Holocaust denial, was I feel as though Hitler actually partially lost the war due to his efforts to accelerate that process.
Yes.
He put so much resource into doing that.
Yeah.
And as I say, the aforementioned Jordan Peterson there made a fantastic point of actually someone who we already considered probably as heinous and as evil as man could be, was actually worse on that basis of the fact that he was more focused with carrying out the final solution than he was with actually finishing that war.
Yeah.
Hitler, as we touched on there, was actually on the basis of militant tactics an awful general.
He was not a great general, but he was his propaganda and his way of his speeches was so persuasive.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting on that point. The propaganda, as I said there when looking into the psychology of genocide, the propaganda didn't actually do a great deal of work as for influencing the Jewish population, the German population about the Jewish population.
Yeah.
That, surprisingly, it was, I mean, when you look into actually how genocide occurred in Germany, it was a number of steps that all came together to create what it is that you see in front of you, the historical effect. But as you touched on there, one of the real prevalent forces here was Hitler and his ability to command a crowd and execute his point.
Yeah.
Have you seen the English interpretations? The AI have revoiced
it. Yes.
Have you seen these?
Yes, I have, and it's like because when you're seeing the original in German, you're like, what are you saying? But it's the way you just want to listen to him.
It's totally captivating.
It's totally captivating to hear what he like you say in English, and it's so like he's like you want to listen to him. Yeah. He's got that just presence around him, and you can see why kind of the German people.
You can see exactly why.
You can see why they thought, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. He can save us.
Not to mention, actually, in fact, he did do what he said he would do on that basis. Germany's population and economy thrived afterwards.
Yeah, he did.
So on that basis, he did do what was intended. But this is something that it's almost taboo to say this, but Hitler and the Nazi regime, you can totally understand as how they came to power.
Yeah.
From the sharp uniforms with the fantastic iconography, the really, that stark red with the symbol of peace, or the Nazi suits were incredible. Can you imagine? As I say, I mean, not to sound like a Nazi sympathiser here, that by no means at all. But the point is, when you looked at the way that the Nazis were dressed, the way that they carried themselves, the organisation of the battalions, when you look at that, you can well understand why it didn't only get the people on board in terms of supporting the campaign, but actually you got soldiers on board, because you looked and you thought, that would be such an alluring prospect for a young man to look and think that I could be a part of what they thought was such a prestigious and just cause.
Yeah.
Not to mention, as I say, the aforementioned speeches, the notorious speeches by Hitler, were total tripe in terms of what it is that was actually being said in the aspect of Germany weren't being attacked. Germany were attacking.
Yeah.
But by Hitler's standards, and from what it was that Hitler said to his population, he made Germany the us versus them. He made them feel as though it was them that was being attacked. It was them that had been done wrong. It was them that needed to defend. And you know, I mean, even down to what we touched on there with the Jewish population and the poverty that came after the First World War. Those two things were brought together to create a cause and consequence by Hitler, because he said that this poverty that you're feeling is a result of these people. Yeah. Now, of course, it wasn't. It wasn't by any means. His argument, though, on this point was America and capitalism essentially was the reasoning as to why Germany was struck into such poverty. Because of those repairments, it was the greed of capitalism that had brought such dismay.
On your point with America and stuff, America loaned money to Germany.
Did they?
Yeah, this is so interesting. So Germany saw poverty. America didn't want the punishment to be as harsh, because they thought there would be a little bit of consequence. So America gave Germany a ton of money, so they were a little bit okay until the 1930s, around the time when Hitler rised. And then America went through the Great Depression, when Wolf Market Street crashed, so they had to ask Germany for all that money back. Wall Street, thank you.
You're thinking of Wolf of Wall Street.
Sorry, great film, by the way. So when the market crashed, America wanted all the money back from Germany, so Germany had to pay all of that back with interest, because money, and that's when they went full on. They were worse than they were when they first started.
So on that basis, the philanthropy of America actually became a great issue for Germany.
Yes,
it wasn't intentional in that aspect. I know that they were persecuted and prosecuted in the initial stages, but as you say, there was a sort of rescinding of such harsh punishment there.
Yeah, France wanted the most harsh, and Britain a bit of the middle, and America didn't want to give them much punishment. That was basically how the three main powers was, because France were the ones that got hurt the most in both wars, to be fair. France had the most death on the Allies side and in both wars.
Well, where would we put Russia on in terms of? I mean, my estimation, or my understanding rather, of Russia is they were essentially allies, but not literally allies.
Literally allied.
Because on that basis, Russia would by far and away have the most casualties.
Yeah, because they're those people. I can fully understand that, and I'm trying to remember on the top of my head. With the Treaty of Versailles, I always remember it always being Britain, France, and America. I can't on my top. I can't remember what Russia was at that. No, that was it. Russia pulled out the war because 1917, the Russian Revolution.
Oh, that's right.
So at that point, they turned communism. Yeah. That was it. The Tsar died, and the Tsar was taken over by
Stalin.
Not Stalin. Lenin. Before. Lenin. That was it. So they pulled out the war. So they weren't part of it anymore. They were doing their own thing, starting communism. So that's why they weren't part of the Treaty of Versailles. But yes, you are right. The numbers of deaths, it probably would have been Russia that had the most.
Yeah, but as you say, there's a different climate of war there.
Yeah, different climate of war. At that point, they were doing their own thing, building up their nation again.
They were having a civil war on their own.
Yeah, basically. That's kind of why... Because the Russian people were miles behind, which is why they kind of changed into the Soviet Union regime, because... Yeah. The communism regime, because at that point they had something called the Tsar, which was basically just an autocrat, which is basically they did what they want, why the people were poor and suffering. So Russia about why we were industrial revolutionising, like building like buildings, and like we were doing trains, we were basically modernising. Russia weren't. They were still just working on fields and they weren't building any big buildings, while the Tsars would just party all the time. And they basically had enough, and then Lenin came around and just proposed
communism.
Yeah, basically.
Mind you, did Trotsky come before? Like,
do you know what? I really want to make sure I get this right. Who was first? I don't think.
I think by the
it was 1970.
Lenin certainly went. Let's gloss over this topic because we're not well informed enough to make the point.
Yeah.
There was something that we touched on earlier, just very briefly there about Japan.
Yeah.
Do you know how much do you know regarding Japan's involvement in World War II?
Japan, I would say not enough to. Japan was always the weak side. I remember little bits of Japan they were trying to invade China. There was bits of China.
Well, they actually did invade China.
They did invade China, and for them it was all about gaining little islands off Germany at the time. No, it weren't Germany. That's World War One. Sorry, I don't think I'm not that well informed.
You touch on an interesting point there that I should go into of China's. Not total invasion, but certainly the pushing into the heart of China by the Japanese. There was a very morbid but interesting topic that I looked into not so long ago, and it was about the biological and chemical weapons sectors that were within the Japanese Imperial Army. Yeah. Now, this sector in particular, the one in question, was called Unit 731.
Okay.
Now, Unit 731, as the name goes, were tasked with finding out how they could best create and distribute biological and chemical weapons.
Yeah.
Now, you've heard of the Geneva Convention.
I think so, but can you remind me?
The Geneva Convention was essentially a list of rulings for what is and isn't a war crime.
In warfare, yeah.
Now, before the Geneva Convention was the Geneva Protocol. Yep. Now, the Geneva Protocol essentially said the one ruling of no chemical weapons involved.
That was it, yes.
Because after seeing how awful mustard gas was in World War One, the general consensus was this is too wicked even for war. Now, one of the only countries that did not sign this treaty and did not agree to this protocol was Japan.
Yeah.
So in turn, the lovely citizens of Japan, or some of them, I should say, created a specific regime and a specific unit called Unit 731. Now, in this sector, their specific intention was to create the most prolific and the most violent of weaponry, as to accelerate and enhance their ability to win essentially whatever war they were involved in. Yeah. Now, later on in the history of this unit and the Japanese Imperial Army, there were intentions to drop a biological weapon on the shores of San Francisco, or coast rather, of San Francisco, which was the bubonic plague. So Japan had intended to drop the bubonic plague on San Francisco toward the end of the Second World War. Now, the only thing that actually stopped this from occurring was the atomic bomb. Which
is so interesting because of the whole Manhattan Project, which was the making of the first atomic bomb. Whereas basically America didn't kind of know what to do, and then the Germans, they figured out to split the atom first.
Yes.
And when they learned to split the atom, that's when America... So Germany should have made the first bomb, but Hitler, because this is what's so interesting, it was Jewish science. So Hitler didn't he didn't want to use it. It was Jewish science, which is what was America's great advantage, because Hitler's so stubborn.
Talk about ego.
Because he has such an ego on him. It was Jewish people that made that assumption you can split the atom to make the bomb. Germany were like 6-7 months ahead. I can't remember the two German scientists that did it, but they were both Jewish. And they were so stubborn, because Hitler was so stubborn. They didn't win the atomic bomb, as we see. And Oppenheimer did what he.
I Have Become Death. The Destroyer of Worlds.
Great film.
Do you know this is really fascinating. As I say, I'm going to bring it back round to the Japanese involvement in this part of what we're talking about. Yeah. It's really fascinated me when I looked into how nuclear weapons have actually changed the psychological formulation nowadays. Now,
Yes.
the world changed entirely as a result of the nuclear weapon being something that we had to consider. People went from being totally in understanding of the fact that they were in control of their destiny, that it was up to them what it was that happened to them. Once the nuclear weapons came into play, people became painfully aware of the fact that someone somewhere could just press a button and all of a sudden
The world
would be no longer.
It's just a big red button now, isn't it?
What fascinated me to look into this was when I say, on a sort of neighbouring topic here, looking into the psychology of genocide. Part of what happens when genocide occurs is that many people are blind to what it is that is actually happening. They don't actually know what is happening. They don't know what it is that they're involved in. Now, the Manhattan Project had something like 100,000 people working on it in some way or another. And the Manhattan Project, once the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killed over 100,000 people. Tell a lie, actually, there. I think it might have been 10,000 people working on it, and 100,000 people had died. Certainly over 100,000 people were killed in those bombings.
Exactly.
Now, it's very interesting to look at the fact that you had 100,000 people die with however many thousand people working on this project, and we don't consider that a genocide. Now, where if we were to look into, say, the Rwandan massacre, we can understand, of course, this is a genocide. We can look at that and we can talk of the depravity of this, as with insert any genocide you can think of. We distinguish them under that pejorative. Now, we don't look at something like the Manhattan Project and think, God, this is one of the
It's a turning point of history.
It is, but we don't look at it as one of the sort of precursors to genocide. We wouldn't call the dropping of the atomic bomb a genocide, and I would say rightly so. What is interesting to look into here, though, is so many innocent people died as a result of this occurring. So we can't make that distinguishing of, oh, no, this bomb was dropped on a specific group of people and it was a necessary thing. It may well have been a necessary thing given what it was that we just said about San Francisco, but as I say, we don't throw it in as a genocide. What is interesting to explore here is the ethics of killing in general. Now, I would argue that killing 100,000 people, no matter the circumstance, is an awful thing. But interestingly on this point, were we seeing a sort of lesser of two evils occurring, in the sense of, as you touched on there, if America didn't develop this weaponry, you would have had the Japanese deploying their wicked and depraved biological and chemical weapons on Allied soil, and equally well, as you say, there may well have been, besides Hitler's arrogance, a world in which the Germans would have got there, at which point, who knows what would have happened.
Exactly.
What's interesting to explore here is the moral landscape and the mindset of someone like Robert Oppenheimer, in the sense of, what would it be like to be the person, as he said, the destroyer of worlds, where you think, on one side of this, I have saved my side of the world. I have provided something that has ended the war indefinitely. But equally well, as he says in that very, very famous quote, he's brought something into the world that is by no means a positive influence if you put it down. If you are to take out this sort of necessary caveats, I must admit, you've brought something into the world that is awful. Now, as I say, it's not fair to sort of blame or castigate Oppenheimer, because on that basis it was necessary. He had to do that because someone else would have done it. And for all the people to have the power in the first place, for the Allies to have it would have been a far better history than if Japan or Germany were to have these forces. But it is interesting to look into the fact that history is certainly written by the victor. And whoever it is that, usually America, are the ones on the benefiting side of history, will create this sort of narrative around things. And an interesting point, just to sort of round that out, is if you look into the way that the global landscape changed after nuclear weapons were brought into existence, you can look at the way that the what would you call it? The film industry changed in places like Japan versus in places like America. So in Japan, you have, as you will know, Godzilla. Godzilla came out after the dropping of the atomic bomb, and this is a town destroying nuclear monster.
Basically, kind of a figment of what they're basically describing the Americans.
Exactly, in a sort of inadvertent sense, yeah. And you've got the Americans releasing the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, X-Men,
like superheroes
protecting the world with their nuclear power.
It's incredible, isn't it? Political opinions and stuff of like some films like when Oppenheimer came out. They didn't show it. Japan didn't want to show it.
Didn't they?
No, because they're basically talking about the man that created the bomb that blew parts of their country up. So
it glamorises. I thought Oppenheimer was a fantastic movie.
It's a great film.
And I suppose I would be doing it disservice to the quality of the script to say that it glamorised the creation of the atomic bomb, because I don't think it did. I think it actually told the story of the back and forth and the terror and the dismay of creating that. I don't think that was by any means a happy story.
No, it's like
it's not claiming or confessing the look how amazing it was that America created the atomic bomb. I would say it actually almost says the opposite thing.
I think like I said, the way they were trying to the bomb is trying to say, oh, this is amazing. What look, we've created something that it was a need for them. It was like, we don't want to do this, but we have to do this, otherwise something bad could really happen. And in history, we will look at this, the creation of the atomic bomb. We talk about it now, like nuclear war. If there ever was another nuclear war, or no, if there was a nuclear war. That's it. I think we all die in about 3 or 4 hours, and
it's the biggest of existential risks.
Exactly, and like soon the atomic bomb was created, like he said, destroyer of worlds. He's now become something that he knows that at any point now he's released this bomb, everyone's going to make them now, and it can.
Well, I mean, and as well, the nuclear weaponry is strangely simple to make. I use that word very loosely, but I mean North Korea, who are certainly a failing society, have these weapons.
Yeah.
They are creatable. There's actually something very interesting I was looking into of how we've consistently been seeing the story of China intending to invade Taiwan.
Yeah, they've been trying to do it for years.
It's certainly something that they want. Now, the very interesting sort of part of this that you wouldn't be expected to know, and I didn't know until about 2 hours ago, was the importance of that conflict not happening on the basis rather of what it would mean for technology. So Taiwan are the sort of chief creators of microchips.
Oh yeah.
So though you'll have various things, there'll be production and various sort of aspects of the process will be carried out in places like Malaysia, for instance. The actual creation of these microchips occurs in Taiwan. Now, if Taiwan were to be seized by China, they would essentially take this power. The power of the microchip would be in the Chinese hand. And it's very interesting, actually, when you look into the advancement of AI and the way that AI could potentially go in relation to sort of tipping points like this, of just to play devil's advocate, what would happen if China did invade Taiwan? Maybe this is why this is such a pressing issue for people to make sure that doesn't happen. For things like that you don't realise there's a power there that would be harnessed as a result of that seizure.
And like I said, we don't want to make the same mistakes. We're trying to avoid making the same mistakes by letting people have countries that they want.
Exactly.
We did that with Hitler, and Hitler got greedy and carried on. Yeah. So we're much more putting our foot down on things nowadays. The UN about you don't do this and stuff like that. And like I say, if they were allowed to do to have the power of microchips, and what I wouldn't put it past China to share it with Russia.
Yeah, I mean,
Because Russia and
they're not bosom buddies, but they've got common enemies. The enemy of my enemy, sort of thing.
yeah, exactly. And I 100%, you wouldn't put it past them of trying to become one of those powerful countries. Imagine both of them have power of AI basically because of how powerful all these microchips are, and it's incredible. The possibilities with AI and everything is quite scary to imagine if it's in the wrong hands.
I think I would argue it's scary to imagine. Full stop. I actually I can't see it landing in the right hands anywhere. On the basis of, I believe it's called.
I'm just trying to imagine like AI soldiers.
Well,
Or
actually,
like
it's
some-
interesting you say that. There was something I was looking into on a totally different thing. There's a book I'm reading at the moment called The Psychopath Test, and essentially it goes into the mind of the psychopath. It's fascinating, and he's interviewing someone who is quite obviously a bit fucking loopy.
Yeah.
And he is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist,
Oh, really,
but
yeah.
not the conventional 9/11 conspiracy theorist. You know, some people say that there was a plane specifically that went into the Pentagon because the Pentagon had released debts in the days before.
Yeah.
This guy was a no-planer theorist. So he is under the assumption that there were no planes involved in 9/11.
So just put a man that went for a building or something.
Well,
Or a
what
bomb.
his hypothesis here in his absolute genius. I will caveat this actually with the fact that he did later go on to say that he believed he was the Messiah and the second coming of Christ.
Oh, there you go.
So David Shaler was his name.
We have to look.
Fucking crackpot.
I'm gonna have to
yeah.
look after this.
Yeah. His belief was that if you actually watch the footage back, it was a missile that had a hologram of a plane around it.
It just sounds mental. It
Sounds absolutely absurd.
Good.
The interesting thing, just to kind of bring these two topics together here, is that as a theory in that realm is absolutely absurd and it is totally ignorant. But there have been released files from either the CIA or the FBI on holograms and how holograms could be used in the aspect of war, in a warfare circumstance. And one of the things that they did look into was whether you could have a military force of regular, actual human force that had a hologram addition, so that it looked like you had far more soldiers than you did, or that it looked like from satellites that there were soldiers placed in bases and camps where they weren't.
It's like with North Korea's nuclear arsenal. Like they say they've got more than there is, but then there's satellites saying they don't have as much as what they say, and
That doesn't surprise me.
it doesn't surprise you because most people will try and say what they need to say, and like you said, it was satellites saying like they creating these ideas of soldiers that look like holograms, and it's mental to think we want it sounds malarkey, in other words, or just some
yeah, but
in other words, bullshit.
Well, I don't know. I think it's I think it's in some ways it's a lesser of concerns when it comes to the AI question with regarding warfare and this is something that, do you know a gentleman called Sam Harris?
No, explain.
We should talk about him at another stage because it's a can of worms on itself, but he's essentially my psychological man crush. And,
okay.
And he made a fascinating point on the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic, right, though on its own was not a particularly catastrophic event, it was blown out of proportion.
Yeah, it could have been it could have been dealt with a bit better by countries earlier on.
Exactly that. And as I say, I mean, even on the basis, I think there's a very small number of fatalities that were actually directly attributed to COVID. Now, as I say, I mean not to speak on a topic that I am not 100% well informed on, but I think that's a kind of a general consensus nowadays is that COVID-19 was not actually as much of an issue as we thought it was.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, though, is on a global scale, the message that COVID-19 sent to people, or to the wrong people, should I say, is that the world can so easily, along with its economies, be stopped by a cold.
It's scary, isn't it?
You have the capacity and the ability to eradicate normal life almost within what? COVID-19, I remember...
it was this. It started, I think, November 2019. It started in China.
I remember it coming here in January because I believe it was January 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember sat on my sofa watching Chelsea just sign someone in the January window. I can't remember who it was. And
you need some players.
Yeah, well, there you go. I remember that happening, and within the space of by March, it was
March,
all of a sudden
March 20th. We're in lockdown.
Yeah, all of a sudden it was a serious issue.
I find it so, and I find so interesting, like with COVID-19, with these like colds, and it's how it can all be stopped by one little illness, not illness, but the big illness, big illness and stuff. But it could have been stopped. So I think. One of the countries had the lowest death capacity, or one of the lowest transmission. I think it's South Korea or Japan. One of them locked their borders very quickly when it started going out of proportion, and had the less deaths, and they were out of lockdown very quickly because they were quick to act to it. Like with us, we should have locked down, in my opinion, like 3 or 4 weeks ago before we did.
Should we have locked down?
Yeah, I still think I can understand why we didn't, because we didn't want to stop our economy. But
that's my point though. Is in general, I know various experts on this topic, which I am not, have said that we did need to lock down, but on that point of the desperation we had to not halt the economy. And when we actually look at it on the grand scale and think COVID was, in every sense of the word, a glorified cold.
Yeah, it was.
You know, was that a necessary part of this process? I do want to just bring it round just to, because we're slightly going off in a different direction here. Yeah. The point that I was bringing to, with regard to COVID, is the fact that, given the fact we have seen how easily the world can be halted, what message does that send to the malignant population of this world, of the fact that so long as if you can create the right thing, you can stop the world. And this thing doesn't have to have a high potency. It doesn't have to have a high percentage of kind of catching it to being killed by it. Fatality, I think is the word I'm looking for. Yeah. How much carnage would the world be in if someone, as Japan once did or tried to do, developed a biological weapon that had a 25% fatality rate?
It's scary. Like I said, it's scary to think, if in today's world, if one person wants to do something, if they really want to do something, I believe they can figure it out. Or like a country or a nation. Like if China, in my opinion, I still believe if China really wanted to, they would invade Taiwan. But they're scared because of other things that could happen, the consequences of if they do it. Because in the back of my mind, if there's any like major incidents that happen that could cause a war, it's going to be nuclear. The next war we have, the next big war we have, will be nuclear, and that the consequence of a nuclear war is obliteration, basically.
Well, certainly nuclear fallout would do away with plenty of people afterwards.
It'd be Fallout 4 in real life.
There you go.
Exactly.
Just you're not playing it on your
PlayStation.
You're
I don't know where we would be.
You're incinerated into oblivion.
Yeah, and I like going back. Yeah, going back to your point. Yeah, like I said, if someone really wants to do something, they can do it.
Yeah. And
like with Japan, with the San Francisco plot,
San Francisco.
Yeah, the San Francisco plot, because they wanted to, and it is scary. It is.
Oh, that was perfectly intended. There was the only thing that stopped that was the atomic bomb.
It was the atomic bomb,
because they had scheduled to do it on September the 22nd. And
like America warned Japan, saying we are going to drop a bomb on you if you don't surrender.
If you don't leave us alone.
Yeah, we had victory in Europe in August, August 14th, I think. No, June. It was June, and then it was August. mid-August, or I can't remember off the top of my head what the exact date was. That's bad. When we finally did it, the victory around the world, and it is scary. I think, like I said, if you put your mind to one thing, you can create something that could end the world or start worlds like the atomic bomb.
I think we're getting toward a place in history in which that becomes easier and easier, where I feel
we modernise,
and at that become more and more connected. Now, ironically, as we become more and more disconnected, but as the world becomes closer and closer to sort of how would I put this? Essentially, everything is becoming more and more connected on the basis of things are either online or in some sense connected via technology.
Yeah.
What is interesting to look into is, you think, how much dismay would the world be in if someone could develop a AI influenced technology that could just cut the power grid? You know, what world would we be in without power?
We'd be back in like
the world would it would be absolute. There was actually a movie that I watched a while ago called Leave the World Behind.
Okay.
Which was about the apocalypse. And it was, I think, actually, in terms of speaking on a commentary of an apocalyptic world, it was fantastic, because it wasn't bombs going off anywhere, it wasn't China invading someone, it wasn't Russia pushing through into Europe. It was technological warfare. The world had essentially stopped on the scale of technology. People could no longer speak to each other. People could no longer access the required. The world just essentially ended through technology ending. So you had a civil war break out essentially, and it was set in America, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And standard.
And
it was a fascinating insight into how much the world would be affected just by the loss of technology. And really, it wouldn't take long. You know, how long are we talking between, if you can no longer, it's interesting, just on a sort of making a prediction toward the future. Say our cars become sort of essentially electrical, like or mostly electrical. Now, I know there is actually, interestingly, there is some discrepancy as to whether this is even possible, because the generators that fuel these cars, the electric, is fueled by gas. So they still can't get around this issue of essentially there's not enough power to power these cars. That being said, Elon Musk hasn't stopped producing them, so I dare say there's something there that they can work around.
Fair enough.
But can you imagine what world you would be living in if all of a sudden you lost access to your phone, you lost access, the big one actually, not even needing to talk about cars, your credit card. How much money do people actually hold nowadays? How much money do people have cash?
I barely nowadays. Nowadays, I don't really want cash on me.
Yeah, but who has cash? You don't get paid cash.
The
only way that you'll get cash is if you go and get it out, which most people, of course you do, but most people don't do that.
And sometimes,
unless you're a builder, then you're not going to have cash.
Yeah, and sometimes if the bank goes down, someone gives you cash to pay for your weekly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But what was that? Oh, this one. Don't worry.
That's all right.
But for the most part, people don't hold cash. It's not something that people are having nowadays. Yeah. And on that basis, if you wiped out, we saw this a few weeks ago with Barclays, when the system went down.
Yeah,
If that happened across the board, it'd be carnage.
It'd be carnage, because people wouldn't get paid. It just like not. Imagine you just knocked all the banks went down for literally no one getting paid. Everything would crash, and you feel like the world would just stop.
The world would stop working because you would lose the gelling of society. Finance. If you don't have money, then how quickly do you think people are going to resort to carnage and anarchy? Probably within Armageddon. Yeah, probably within. I would say within across the board, probably 3 days before people start thinking, shit, I need to get things for a start.
Panic buying. We'll go back to.
No, you're not panic buying.
Oh,
you can't buy.
You can't buy
so
anything.
You're stealing. Everyone's looting everything, and we've seen, you see it every Black Friday. People go fucking mental.
Oh, yeah.
If you're trying to get something and someone else is trying to get something, people descend into animalistic anarchy, and that would occur very quickly.
Because it is mental to think. It is generally mental to think what could happen if everything just stopped.
Exactly.
It's just, could we actually figure out what are we like? Because this generation is so based on technology. Like, most people, like youngsters now, are on their iPads at about 12 months old now.
Well, I'm not sure there.
12 months. You'll be surprised. No, I think you'd be surprised.
I don't think you could get a child.
I think
I
think you could be surprised.
What, at 12 months?
I generally think at 1 year old you could be very much surprised nowadays.
You're one. The only thing that you're interested in is your mum's boob, and that's the only thing you're caring about.
I think you'd be very surprised nowadays.
Point is, I see the point that you're making there. That the world is totally connected, and even then, this is a frequently directed. Insult towards the younger population. The older population be fucked as well. The whole world is dependent on technology.
Yeah, no, I think
you can't get round that.
You can't. Now you are 100% right.
Hang on. There's the elephant in the room that we have somehow avoided is electricity and heat. Think how many people would actually die in this heat without. How many people do die in this heat?
If they haven't got heating, it's
too cold here. Imagine living in. How many people would die in somewhere like Russia, for example, without any heating?
That's basically kind of what the Russians were suffering back. Like, if we lost all heating, electricity, and everything like that, we're going back like 200, 300 years.
Exactly,
which we can't.
So essentially. Kind of just to bring this back, this thread all the way back round. The loss of financial stability as a result of power outage, heat, electricity, and potentially actually your modes of transport.
Yeah.
That speaks of how potentially dangerous something like AI could be on the basis of its involvement there. Now. The point that I kind of intended to go here before we got slightly sidetracked in some weeds was the more accessible technology becomes, the more amount of people you open to be able to doing something awful with it. Think of the fact that the phone that you have in your pocket, and the technology just in this space now. Would not have been far short of the greatest technology on the planet 30 years ago.
Yeah.
How simply, or how could a president of the United States have an iPhone 19 or whatever it is in 1995? No, they couldn't. They have the most technologically advanced position in the world, and they couldn't have what we have now. Yeah. What does that say of our acceleration in technology? It means that easier and easier and more consistently, people who you don't want to have certain things will have certain things. And on that basis, you think, how quickly is it before someone who is, hackers on this basis, hackers are the next. I actually don't agree on the point of what the next war would be. I would say it's more likely that you have a technological war.
Okay.
Like the fact that there's something like cutting power outages, that would cause so much carnage, and you wouldn't have to drop a bomb to do it.
Yeah.
You could do that covertly, or there. You couldn't do it covertly because obviously otherwise Russia would have done it.
Oh, Russia would have done it.
The point is, it could be done far more covertly than dropping a bomb.
Yeah.
Because you couldn't see it happen. You could all of a sudden be sat here and everything just goes off.
Oh, yeah, you could.
And the same experience occurs for all of the world, but whoever it is that have done it.
Exactly. And like I said, I like the idea of saying it could be a technological war next, because it would But it'd be interesting to see. It's basically the strongest will to live. In other words, and if let's say Russia were to cut the power out in America and the UK and just somehow just blanket all, how much would it be before they all start beating each other up? And they're basically fighting. You're basically starting multiple civil wars with everyone else.
You would be starting civil wars. As I say, this leave the world behind us. Exactly that.
And why Russia? And then it will slow everything down, and it would give Russia time to basically catch up on everyone else while they're all fighting with each other. America and England wouldn't have time to go and fight Russia because they're trying to sort out their own country because everyone else is fighting each other over different stuff.
I think more so than getting more kind of catching up to speed. I think that would be the act of war. I think the whole point of that would be if you could thrust a whole population into essentially the Stone Age.
Yeah.
With one fell swoop, you would win the world.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Russia might not be as potent of a force as America, but that doesn't matter if you don't have any power.
Yeah. It doesn't.
I mean. Just to hypothesize here, if power goes out, so does your radar. So
how are they going to know where they are, what they're doing?
How easily are you going to detect a nuclear weapon coming towards you if you don't have the appropriate systems?
And if you cut all power, how are they going to send a nuclear weapon off?
Exactly, you won't.
In other words, if somehow Russia or someone can just cut the power to a whole country, you'd win the war instantly. Because,
That would win the war.
Yeah, because what can you do? You can't respond. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's just just an instant win, and it is mental to think if that was a possibility. But maybe with AI, if AI did become powerful enough where you could just imagine loads of androids or loads of basically just doing everyone's bidding, basically their servants and basically your own spies. In other words, imagine someone made an AI robot from Russia and sent it into England and just spot it. You'd question what's real and what's not real. And for spy, just imagine going into somewhere and if they'll never get into the spaces that they need to get to, which also scares me if AI or robots got jobs, started getting jobs in that. Because what happens if they hack? Let's say the Russians hacked a robot or hacked one of the AI in a important working sector. Yeah. They can just cut the power like that.
Or could leak information.
And then they can report back, which is a scary prospect to think why we can't have. I can understand. I do think in the next 50, 60 years AI will become more and more powerful, which is scary.
Oh, there's no question of that.
Which is scary to think how long will it be before we start having robots or...
Well, I mean, the thing that is sort of glossed over on this topic is we already do. When you go to McDonald's, do you get served by a person? Most of the time you don't. You go to a fucking massive iPad. The point is, we're already into that age. This is already occurring. Actually, when I went to Amsterdam not so long ago, I was walking through the airport and there was those robots where you can just.
I see it all on TikTok now. It's just these robots that just give you the food.
Very amusing.
If you go to Japan, I think Japan's one of the most modernised technology places in the world now.
Probably. And
the stuff like in South Korea and stuff, it's robots doing stuff for you. It's nuts and it's mental, and we're in a, like I said, as years go on, as I'll get older and you'll get older, it'd be so interesting, and then we're all going to be like, oh, I miss the old days.
Well,
where it wasn't as complicated.
I don't know. I mean, that's murky waters that I'm not informed enough to go into.
Yeah.
But I think an interesting point on this, as I say, given the fact this is already occurring, it will continue in the path that it continues in, because you think on the basis of, from an economic scale, humans don't make sense to as workers.
We never did.
If you can create, no, we do, but if you can create a force that don't require pay, don't need rest, and will just do what it is that you program them to do. That is far more to your advantage than someone who might call in sick one day.
It's basically free slavery.
It's slavery. Exactly.
It's basically slavery, and we're basically just becoming lazy because we feel like we can just all the jobs that no one wants, we can just send some AI to do it or some robot to do it.
Well, that might be the case, but I actually looked at into a video of all of the potential existential threat that AI poses, and one of the most interesting and I felt possible ones was the fact that there could well come a time in which humans just simply aren't required for any job. You know, where technology has advanced to such a point where humans are just surplus to requirements. Now, you can always argue the human factor on these things, of if someone wants to get even the most simple of things, like if you want to get a train ticket to somewhere you've never been before, you'd probably rather get it from a person because you have that human innate trust that you won't get with a system.
Yeah.
But a penny pinching capitalistic conglomerate will not care a great deal for your preferences on that behalf. Point is, the interesting way that this could devolve is if we got to a stage in which society just simply didn't, the only benefit that humans working jobs had was that human factor. If humans were to lose their jobs and were just simply no longer required, what would that mean for the human population on a number of scales? You know, the interesting analogy that they used was how horse and cart went out of fashion when cars came into play, or the early iterations of cars.
Yep.
Horse and cart didn't cease to exist, but when was the last time you saw a horse and cart?
Blackpool.
But they don't. You don't see them. They're still there.
They're still there. You don't.
They
see
are
them.
still used, but they're not. They are so vastly outnumbered.
They're just it's modernising.
That would essentially be that. So this theory suggests humans versus artificial intelligence. Of we would just become just not anywhere near as good as what it is that we now have.
Yeah.
And that in itself, you know, there was kind of certain threads that they went into with that, such as you would have a position in which, of course, the world would still require funding and finance.
Yeah.
And if you don't have jobs, well, how do you acquire
money?
money?
I was wondering that.
Well, universal basic income was one of the things that they had proposed, of the fact that you would have a governmental body essentially just provide people
So
with
would
money.
this technically become communism?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Because technically, if you're saying that
everyone gets this amount of money, it's a good point.
It's technically communism.
It's a very good point, actually.
So basically, we got basically the government's robots doing the jobs, or we just get the government like, right, everyone gets this amount of money in a year.
Yeah, I mean, on what it is that communism stands for. Yeah, you're right.
It's basically the government decide what you get and what you don't. You live here, you live there, and here's the money. That's basically we basically would become communists. In other words, if we're going to do that,
possibly.
Yeah.
But the interesting sort of possibility that was suggested here is you would either have anarchy in the form of people just don't know what to do because the world has just stopped as they know it. You're no longer. I mean, think how many people's lives would just be totally uprooted if they could no longer do their job. Yeah. It makes up most of people's life, even between not just the job itself, but the preparation for it, the coming home from it.
It feels like the B movie, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, it's when they all just they've been given so much honey and basics.
What do you do?
What do you do? They just sit. They just sit and just sit on sunbeds and they don't do anything and they don't work and they just relax and everything. It's like the world stops and then like you said, all the flowers, they all died. So what would happen to the landscape of the world? I know like the AI and we basically AIs that stop stuff. Do we just become bored? I don't know. We would. I think I generally think we need that routine of getting up, going to work, doing this and make our own money, because it would. I would love to just win the lottery and sit down, but most days I'm off this week from work at my other job, and I don't I haven't got anything planned, but I feel like some parts of this week I think I'm just going to be really bored.
Yeah.
And
because you don't have that stimulation.
I don't have
you need to do something yourself.
Exactly. Like for me, having a route, I think it'd be the routine that I think a lot of us would struggle with. Of we now can't do. We don't need to go and do this now because someone else is doing it for us.
What do I do?
What do I do? Do I go outside?
It's the chaos of profligacy in the sense that when people have you see it where a great analogy. I think it might have actually been Jordan Peterson that said this, of the when you're lost in the desert, the fear that you have is not because you don't know where you are, it's because you can go anywhere.
Yeah.
So you don't know where to start. You have too many options. Yeah. You don't know where to go.
Yeah.
It would essentially be the same thing of if you didn't have something specifically in line
for that
what
day.
do you do? Now this is one of the arguments that people use for and against universal basic income is on one side you might open up the opportunity for people to go and do what it is they actually want to do.
Yeah.
Or for instance, for me, I work enough to have money behind me and money in front of me.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I don't work a great deal. I do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But for most people, for a lot of people, there would not be enough stimulation to, and I mean this not to sound anywhere near as pricky as it sounds, but some people just don't know what they want to do. I'm fortunate enough to know what I want to do, but a lot of people don't. I didn't at one point. And if you don't, then what do you do? And the point with this is, some people argue for UBI of it would open up the opportunity for people to actually do what it is they want to do.
Yeah.
But you would also lose, one of the arguments that I believe Joe Rogan or someone on his podcast put forth was, imagine you're a starving artist and you can just spend all of your time working on your art. That's great. But how many starving artists become profligate artists because they were a starving artist? It's that motivation behind you of, I have to get out of here. Yeah. If you become...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go for it.
If there's, like I said, there's not a motivation to do something, like if you realise, oh yeah, I've got all the time in the world to do this now, I can do it now, I don't think you're going to be as prominent or as, you won't want it as much to get out of the life you already don't want. You do your job to get out, find something better, but if you take that away from them and realise, oh, I can just do this, and then I find loads of other people do it because they're trying to fill the boredom. So more people are going to want to get interested in the activity that you love as much, and it'll be hard for you to expand and become a big name or something bigger because everyone else wants to they're going to find something else to fill the boredom because they've got more time now. And because people got more time, you're going to find it harder to get yourself out there.
I also think that just in general, people are less likely to choose the right. I mean, look, in actual fact, most people, certainly at our age, have enough time and freedom to do the right thing, but they don't. You just fill your time. You'll sit on your phone, or
I could scroll TikTok for hours.
But people do. I mean this in no offence to you particularly, but people do waste their time, and you have time now.
100%.
And on that basis, you think, well, if you times that amount of time by 10, do you think people would actually choose to do anything different, or would they just do the same thing more?
I think most people would just do the same because if there's nothing planned for them, I feel like most people would just sit there.
Yeah.
They don't.
You don't know what to do.
I'm like this most of the time when I've got a day off work because I work in the evenings. For me, I'm if I've got a day when I go to work, I'm basically just getting ready to work in the evening.
Yeah.
And
it sets you up for your day.
I'm set up for the day. I know what I'm doing. But then the days I'm off, I'm basically just sitting there like. I sometimes just go to my mum, are you doing anything? To fill the boredom. Because I'm just, most of the time I will just lay in my bed or something like that. And I've realised more when I talk about myself, that if I'm not doing anything, I'll lay in bed a lot more. And I think I've had mental health problems in the past, and where if I'm not doing anything, I have to try and motivate myself to get up and do something. If I haven't got work all in my day off, because I'm just so in myself, I'm in my own world sometimes, and I want sometimes to get out of that place so I can be happier. And I'm just trying to express. It's just the boredom, really. It's trying to figure.
Boredom kills.
It is what does it for me, and I'm trying to feel the boredom, but I don't want to just sit in my room. But I don't know what to do, so I just waste time, and then before I know it, it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, and it's like, there's no point now.
No point now. Yeah, that's right. It devolves. I'd be interested just to explore with you, so long as you're comfortable.
Yeah, that's fine.
Whether you feel as though that mental didn't need that anyway. Whether that mental issue has occurred as a result of your behaviour, or whether the behaviour has occurred as a result of the mental issue. So, if you sit in bed all day, you are going to feel depressed.
Yes.
There's no two ways around it, unless you're terribly ill, in which case you won't care.
Oh, yeah.
You'll be terribly ill, so you're not going to be happy anyway.
Exactly.
If you sit in bed all day, you will feel terrible. Humans have an innate desire. Even the laziest of people have a desire to pursue. Yeah. Now, for some people, that pursuing might take the form of how much food can I eat today. But the point is, humans have a sort of inbuilt desire to achieve something.
Yeah.
And if you sit in bed, you can't achieve something. You know, there's very little that you can do, and your body will respond. It's important to remember that the makeup of the human anatomy is just a chemical balance.
Yeah.
It is the balancing of chemicals, and if these chemicals are off kilter because you're not appropriately fueling the brain, you're not going to feel good. And the easiest of ways to bring the wrong thoughts into your head is to sit in your bed and do nothing. Now, as I say, what I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on is whether you feel as though, I appreciate totally this. I mean this not to sound insensitive, but if you get out of the bed, that's the step that creates the next things. Now, I do appreciate that there are times when you just don't want to get out of that bed. But from what it sounds like, you do want to get out of the bed, you just can't think of a reason why to. How do you feel about that?
I can understand, and I like I said, I try and talk about it to myself sometimes. Like, it was like last week, I woke up and I was in my bed basically all day until about 7 o'clock, and sometimes for me it's like I need to get out of bed, but I don't. I just try to motivate. I have to sometimes push myself out of bed.
Yeah, but we all do.
And sometimes my brain just doesn't allow it, and I do sometimes wonder why. And with everything going on, it's hard for me to explain, because in my head I'm like, this is normal in my mind, and I think this ain't right though. For me, my two best friends are up at uni now, so I barely see them. I'm like, I know it sounds quite depressing and sad. I haven't got many friends.
I can empathise with
that. So for me, it's like for me, I've not got many people to really talk to, because everyone's basically all busy and doing what they need to do. So for me to find motivation, and for me to struggle to do the simplest things, sometimes I can be sometimes really stubborn. Like, my mum would ask me to do the dishwasher and stuff, and sometimes for some reason I'm so stubborn sometimes, and some days I won't just do it, and I don't understand why. Something in my brain stops me some days, but then some days I can be really happy, and I'm socialising. But I always find that when I have a plan.
Yeah. Like
today, coming on here, and so I was up. I was actually looking forward to it, and it was something different, something exciting. I love doing some things different, and the opportunity to speak my mind and to say this is what I've gone through is a very interesting prospect for me, and it just makes me more happier to try and do something. And then, so I'm always gonna. To me, I'm at that age. I don't know, 20-year-old, where I'm always just gonna have that up and down days where I'm like, I want to get out and do something, but then some days I don't. But I'm my nan would say the same thing to me. I'm more happier when I'm out of that room and seeing daylight. So sometimes I need to like walk the dog and stuff, and I need to motivate myself. Let's do this. This will make you happier, and if I can make myself happier, I'll feel better in myself because I'm trying. Like I said, I've had depression in the past, and definitely during the COVID times, where I didn't attend school for over 2 years. It got really bad. I got more violent. I was really struggling inside mentally with my own health because I felt no one was there to support me. Even though my family, there was a support that there can ever be, but in my head I didn't feel supported, and trying to express myself because of my autism. I've autism, and I think it's hard for me to express my feelings in a way that can sometimes be said easier for a person that, like, my family have been so supportive. They've been with me every step of the way, and from where I was 3 or 4 years ago to where I am now is a massive change. I actually am in a better place where before, during COVID, I did think about, you can interpret it, yeah, and I was on the verge of doing it, and from just the best way to say it is I would not have got there without talking to myself. I did something called CBT, so I had therapy.
Behavioural therapy.
Yeah, I had therapy and stuff, and that helped me a lot to say. And sometimes I would catastrophize things, and I believe that therapy did save me. And if I didn't have the therapy, I don't know if I would be here now. And that comes back to what I said about me laying in my room. So on the Mondays and the Wednesdays when I come up to see you at the club, for me that is my socialising time. That gets me out of the house. That gives me a purpose to go and do something. Seeing like Ian and Matt, seeing all my friends having a laugh, for me, it keeps my brain ticking. If I didn't have certain things, I don't know if I would be here. Getting out and talking to people definitely makes me feel better. So those days when I just lay in my bed, they are my saddest days. But sometimes my brain just doesn't. Some days it allows me to do what I want, and sometimes it don't. And I'm just trying to be as happy as I can ever be. And yeah, it's pretty how I describe. I know it sounds quite confused and sounds all.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, it sounds all like messy and stuff, but my life is a little messy, but I know I'm loved, and I know I can do it, and I know I can. And nowadays, I just take it a day at a time, and I'm happier than I was those years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago now.
But I think you should keep in mind that this is the hardest thing to gain perspective on when it comes to mental dismay is perspective itself. We find it so difficult to actually put into an understanding that, as you say there, that your dad loves you, your mum loves you, your sisters love you, your friends love you, that there's a whole body of people around you that love you, but when you're in that space, it just doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
I can fully understand where you're going there. What I would feel, I'd be interested to just see your thoughts on, is what you described there with coming up to the club and socialising. That's purpose. It's stimulation as well. Now, what you don't get when you're in bed, even if you sit on your phone, is stimulation. Your brain is not stimulated.
Yeah.
And the brain has a sort of inbuilt mechanism of if you don't stimulate it, it will stimulate itself. Now, the way that comes out, given the circumstance that it's in, is negatively. Because if you're doing things all the time and you're striving towards goals, or you're creating things, or you just feel generally bonded with your society, you put positive influence into your brain, because you're more likely to be thinking about things. This is slightly rough around the edges, but you're more likely, because you're in more positive places, you're more likely to be thinking about those positive things. I am innately an overthinker and someone who finds it difficult to actually congratulate themselves for things. But though I have those thoughts, I also, on a daily basis, have a lot of positive thoughts towards things like, you know, the fact that you're striving for the podcast, or you're learning about this thing, or you're going to the gym, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those thoughts are in my head more and more often. And the point to be made here is, inside stimulation is evidence.
Yeah.
Now, what happens when you're just sat in bed is you provide yourself with the wrong sort of evidence. Your mental dialogue will follow along the lines of, oh, look at you, just fucking sat in bed, you know, not doing anything. What
I say it to myself.
And you beat yourself up about it. You could not possibly do that if you were in the gym. You couldn't do it, because the only dialogue, now this can devolve in certain ways, but that's not important for this.
Yeah.
If you're in the gym, the dialogue you teach yourself, or tell yourself rather, is, I'm in the gym. Look at me, I'm in the gym, I'm doing something good. Or I'm reading this book, I'm doing something good. You're telling your brain that you're doing good things. Now when you sit in bed, you're telling your brain nothing. Or if anything, you're telling your brain the wrong thing.
You're not stimulating it.
You're not stimulating it. And as we've touched on there, it's important to note that, for instance, today, I know that I've got, after this, I have a handful of hours, and then I've got to prepare to go and do something else for another period of time.
Exactly.
I have to monitor how my day goes, even if I've got something planned at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because you just have, exactly.
With my work in the evenings,
you know that it's there, and you have to work around it. And even on that basis, you then couldn't stay in bed till 7 because you think, I've got to be at work at 7.
I've got to be at work, so I
might as well get up earlier.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't got as much time. It's like if I'm like you were saying, if I've got work, I normally get up, make sure I'm fed, make sure I've eaten, because I need to be out the door by 5:30 to get to work.
There's things you have to do.
Yeah.
And it is, as we said there, that freedom of choice can become the captivity of choice.
Yeah.
Of, if you've got your whole day in front of you, then you don't know where to start. What's important to remember is the choice is always in your hands. Now, I fully concede that, as I said there, sometimes you just don't want to get out of that bed. But it sounds more so like you do want to get out of the bed. Yeah. You just, as I said before, you just don't know why to.
Why? Yeah.
Now, what is important to remember is you always have the opportunity to provide yourself with that stimulation. If you've got the day free to you, you can do whatever you like. Now, as I say, I understand that can devolve and turn the wrong way, and you go, oh, I have so many options, what do I do? My best advice to you would be to select a handful of things that you know work for you. So, for instance, for me, I know that I will feel better for, it sounds trivial and overdone, but it's things like going for a walk.
Yeah.
I know that I will feel better for going for a walk.
Yeah.
Or I know that I will feel better if I give my brain something to think about. Read a book, write something, go do a podcast.
Yeah.
If you provide yourself with, it's sort of like creating that dialogue for yourself. Of you tell yourself that going to work is important, and thus you need to treat it importantly. You need to get up early. You need to make sure you're fed. You treat it as something that requires your respect.
Stimulate myself to get ready and respect myself, because I know
Exactly.
I need to.
You
be
need
there.
to do it.
I need to do it. It's not like I want to do it. I have to do it. It's literally what if I don't do it, something bad could happen.
Exactly. But it's important to note that this takes some mental training, but you can gain that level of emphasis on anything. I take my own personal endeavours more seriously than other things, because it's what I want to do. So I can't stay in bed all day, because I know there are things I need to do. The same way that you need to go to work. It's the same dynamic. It's the story that you tell yourself and what's actually important to you.
Okay.
And as I say, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so this might sound rough. I try my best here.
Yeah, it's fine.
And the point is, it's easy enough when you're in stable mental frame, or at least an introspective one, to look and go, I know I feel better when I get out of bed. Why don't I just get out of bed?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not that way when you're in that bed. I fully appreciate that.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that, as you said there that your brain sort of stops you from doing it.
Yeah.
You're speaking about it as though it's someone else holding you in the bed.
Yes.
It's your brain. You tell it what to do. Now, there are various things that go into this, but it's up to you whether you get out of that bed.
Yeah.
I know it's the first step on things like this is difficult, and as I say, I really am trying not to sound coarse and insensitive.
It's fine.
But if you want to get out of the bed, get out of the bed.
Yeah.
You know, it is that simple. And on that basis, as I say, I think there is a difference on the behalf of, you do want to get out of the bed, you just don't know why to.
Why?
That is why to. Because you know that even if you don't have something to go and strive for, you know you don't like being in the bed.
Yeah.
So that's what you need to create and cultivate that importance that you have toward your job, toward that point of you go, my happiness is more important than anything. You would agree with that.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Hence why you enjoy going up to the club, because it makes you happy.
Yeah.
Your happiness is the incentive.
Yeah.
The incentive for you to go up to the club or to go to work is the same one for you to get out of bed on a day when you don't have anything. Because what you're trying to do is be happy.
Yeah.
And as I say, the same way that you go to the club because you go, no, I want to go to the club. I want to be happy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. No, I want to get out of bed. I want to be happy.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully understand where you're coming from. And it is, I would 100% agree. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. Just get out of bed. Just tell your brain to get out of bed. And like you said, it does feel like you feel like your brain's controlling you. It's like someone's telling you, stay in bed, even though it's literally
it's your brain
saying stay in bed, which is it is mental when you think about it. And I find it so interesting that how some days I can be. I just think to myself, my brain's just very stubborn, and I can
Maybe
be.
it is.
It is probably as stubborn as where. If I also think I do struggle to sleep, and I think that's another reason why I find it hard to sleep. So most nights I don't fall asleep until about 2 a.m. in the morning.
Is that because you're in bed though?
Yes.
There you
No,
go.
I think it is, unless I'm working and stuff, and then if I'm working, I'm normally asleep by 11. When I come home about 10:30, so I'd say about 11:30, 12 I'm asleep.
But that makes perfect sense though. Is if you're not, your brain, your body will not be tired if it's not done anything.
Yeah.
Now you can sort of reverse tired, where you can. It's like if you sleep too much, you remain tired. Now that's all to do with the ultradian rhythm, which is not important for this.
Yeah.
But you can't expect your brain. There was a point. You have not known my darkest of hours.
Yeah.
And there was a point when I would stay up until 6 a.m. and that was what I was.
I have it. I do have it those days. Like,
but it was because I didn't do anything. I wasn't doing anything. I just sat in bed all day, and then I was on my phone, and I ate shit food. And that was what I did. That was all that I did. I am very. The only time I will ever be awake at 2 a.m. is if I've gone out on an infrequent night out that I go on.
Yeah.
Otherwise, by 11, I'm too tired.
You've set a routine in your head to make sure you keep yourself stimulated, to make sure you are tired. So when it is time to go to bed, you've done so much in the day, your brain can't fight you to stay up.
Your brain doesn't want to stay up. You're tired.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the important thing.
Exactly.
And as I say, I think just to round this out here, it's very easy to fall, and I try very hard to kind of adhere to the minority, I feel, on this, of we can make excuses for the behaviour that we know we don't want to have anyway. So you can look and you go, oh, it's not that easy just to get out of bed. Well, it is.
Yeah.
You know, you are just stepping out of bed, and ultimately as I say, I fully understand the mental warfare that goes on there at points, but you can kind of fuel the wrong fire on this, where you go, oh no, I know it is hard to get out of bed. I know it's hard to get out of bed. No, it's not. You're just standing up.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately, at some point, you have to do away with the empathetic view and move toward one where you go, no, I want to get out of bed. I'm getting out of this bed, and just get out of the bed. I mean, ultimately,
It is as simple as that, though,
it is
isn't
as simple
It
as
is
that.
simple
We
as
can
that.
sort of intellectualize these things, and perfectly understandably, it's because people, you know, I find myself here sort of wincing as I say some words of, you want to be empathetic enough not to hurt someone's feelings, but also
You got to be blunt.
you've got to do what needs to be done, and if you need to get out of the bed, then
Get it, yeah.
do so.
Like,
It is your choice. That's important to know. Is that you have the power here? It's not someone else. It's you. If you want to do it, then do it.
do it. Yeah. Fully, like, you're fully, yeah, you're bang on. You're bang on. It is as simple as just get out of bed. You know you'll feel better.
There you go.
It's just, and I'm trying, like, I am gonna keep try and do that. Just say to myself, Alex, just get out of bed.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And
Tough love is still love.
It's tough love, yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just got to be blunt with yourself and say, what am I actually doing?
Exactly.
Get out of bed and then see how the day goes. And
Exactly. See what happens. And then and at that point then you can gain some ground and some traction, because if you wake up tomorrow and you think, oh, I'm not staying in this bed, and you go, oh, come on, get out of the bed, and then you have a good day, you go, oh, so that's what happens when I get out of the bed.
That's once when I...
And then the day after, it becomes easier. Now, I fully appreciate the first day of doing this is hard, you know, because you think you don't have any evidence behind you, you don't have any traction behind you, you don't have any what's the word,
Momentum, yeah.
but you have to start somewhere, and at some point you have to realise that the ball is in your court, the power is yours, and on that basis, the first time you just go, do you know what? I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to get out of bed and I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to see if even if I feel better sitting in the chair rather than
in a living room,
than laying in the bed.
Yeah, just sitting in a living room.
It's better. It's still better.
Like natural daylight as well.
Exactly. And I think it's important to note on this point that small steps, you know, I have been coarse there and saying, oh, just get out of the bed. It's simple.
But you got to be blunt, though.
But the point is, the goal itself is a simple one, but that does not mean that in the midst of mental difficulty, it's not as monumentous of a task to get out of bed as it is to run a marathon. It can well be that way. So it's important to recognise that and take it as, you don't need to get out of bed and go and run a marathon. You just need to stand up and sit in the chair next to the bed. That's a step.
Yeah.
It's a step. And the important thing is to recognise that these things take time. It's a process, and that what you need to do is you just need to begin working in the right direction and let compounding do the rest for you. If you just do something on a day-to-day basis, it will become easier. It will become second nature. Your issue is an important one, but it's not one that it's one that can be solved on your own. You can solve that, and you will solve it. And there will be days where maybe you go weeks where you don't have that feeling, and all of a sudden that feeling comes back and you find yourself plunged into the bed again.
Yeah.
That's fine. You just go again. You just try again. It's all a process of just trying again. You don't have to do something wrong and all of a sudden that's the end of the road. You can just try again. Keep trying to get out of the bed and see what happens.
Yeah, perfect. Really good, that is, yeah. I fully, that makes sense. It does. It truly does. And yeah, makes sense.
Well, Mr. Lomas, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I hope you've had as much time enjoying the conversation
Oh,
as
yeah,
I
I've loved it. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. Right. See you later, chaps.
Bye. Hey. Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Oh, look, perfect timing.
Oh, perfect timing as well. Nice.